Hi, hopefully you can hear me okay and everything is coming through loud and clear. I'm just checking the feed and making sure it's not pixelated or anything like that. Cool. So I just thought I'd come on and sew up an NCW. It seems to be a tradition with quite a few people over the new year. And I had one cut out that I was actually maybe going to sew yesterday as well as the Harlequin, but we got chatting instead. So I thought I'd come on, get it sewn up, because this is the last of my project that I just kind of randomly cut out that don't have any sort of purpose. For everything else that's cut out is for things to do with the club and what have you. So this was just lying around and I thought I would get it all set up. So just checking that everything's working okay. Just checking that my chat is working all right as well, because we do sometimes get thwart with gremlins. So I'm going to click over to my other camera and get rid of my mouse, just turn that off, and I'll go through the pattern pieces, how I have them cut out, because I do mine slightly differently to the pattern. I've kind of taken bits and pieces from other people who I've watched doing tutorials, and I've taken bits that I like how they've done it, and I've kind of spliced it all together. So this is just kind of how I put mine together. Sue's saying I can see and hear well. That's great, because there is quite a few of us in the house today. So I just wanted to double check that the internet was working, because obviously kids are on TVs and games and what have you. So I'm pleased that everything is loud and clear. So I'll go through, like I say, the pattern pieces, how I have them cut out. I'm doing a mini NCW. That's my favourite. That's what I love to do. It's not very often I make a full size one. So I have 2 flap pieces, outer and lining. I have all of my centres marked. I have my placement for my snaps already marked. So that is per the pattern. So just to try and be a little bit organised. I then have my 2 pocket pieces. Sometimes I do double zip. I am just doing a single zip today. So I have 1 zip and 2 just little scraps to make some tabs. This is water resistant canvas. On the flap I have got some Decaville already attached. It is, you should be able to see that it's out of the seam allowances, and this is on waterproof canvas as well. And I'm using up the very last scraps of my fabric from my bag makers box. So my little tabs are just waterproof canvas. This is a number 3 zip. When I'm making a mini, I prefer to use a number 3 zip. And like I say, my two coin pockets, I do have some Decaville attached to the bottom of one piece, and again it's out of the seam allowances and halfway up. I don't think that's in the pattern. I think that's something that I picked up from somebody somewhere, but that's basically all that piece is, out of the seam allowances and halfway. Then my exterior, again using the last, literally I managed to squeeze this out. There was like slivers from the edges. I managed to get it out. So I have my stabilizer, which is Decaville Light, attached as per the pattern instructions down the middle. I've got my placement for my snap marked and my placement for my name badge, so I don't forget to do it, although I probably still will. I then have exactly the same piece in lining, which is waterproof canvas. So it's a little bit thicker than some of the like the water resistant canvases. This is a 600 denier. I think this one was AA Market that I got it from. If you Google AA Market, it will come up. They have loads of different colours. I have my two lining pieces for my pocket. They go in there, and then my card slots, which is really where I do mine quite differently. So I have a back piece which is per the pattern instructions, and then I have a second back piece as well. I don't cut out my card slots in a big piece and fold it. I do mine slightly differently. So in order to do that, I have my card back piece, and I cut two, not one, and then exactly the same width as this piece. I then cut out two further pieces, one 8 inches deep and one 7 inches deep, and it's the same width as this piece. I have then marked, I don't know whether you can see that on the camera if I get a little bit closer, I've marked along 1/2 an inch. And how I've done that is I've literally just gone along with my 1/2 inch ruler, and I've used my stiletto, and I've just marked along, and I've literally just, I haven't scored all the way through, I've just marked it, and I only go along once. I don't go along any more than that, because then you can go through the fabric, and all that you want to do is make it so that it naturally wants to fold, and it'll be a really nice crisp fold. Because obviously you can't well, you can press waterproof canvas, but it's a little bit difficult, and I prefer not to. So I find just using my stiletto to score along helps it to fold, and it works out beautifully. So those are the pattern pieces, my two back card slots and my two card pieces cut out at 8 and 7 inches. My main pieces, both exterior and lining. I then have my coin pocket pieces and the lining pieces to go with it, and the zip. Obviously the zip is too big, I will be cutting it down. And then I have my two flap pieces, exterior and lining, and the lining is reinforced with Decaville light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a start on my card slots. I tend to go in a certain order when I'm making an NCW, and that tends to be card slots, coin slots, flap and body, because then I sort of feel like it just goes together sort of really quickly at the end. Like once you sew on the body of the NCW together, necessary clutch wallet for anybody who doesn't know what an NCW is, you just kind of feel like you're on the home straight, and it's all coming together. So I'm going to work on these two pieces first. I'm just going to pop these to one side. I'm sewing, I think this is a Tex 70 that I've got in, because that's the newest colour that I've got. I've got an 18 needle in my machine, and obviously I'm sewing on a Jack H2, which is a walking foot machine. So yeah, so we'll make a start. So basically what I'm going to do is where I've scored along at that 1/2 inch, I'm just going to fold it down. If you don't want to score along, what you could do is just draw a line at 1 inch down and then fold this edge to meet it, and you could use some double-sided tape if you wanted to help keep it down and in place. I find that it folds really nicely doing it this way. So I'm just going to top stitch all these edges. When I'm top stitching, I always top stitch at 4.5, and when I am constructing, I construct at 2.5. So if you see me going between stitches, they're the stitches that I'm using. So I'm just going to quickly say hi to Sue, says Happy New Year, and Maureen, who is just resurfacing from this horrible virus. I hope you're feeling better. There's loads going around at the moment. So 4.5 stitch length, and when I top stitch, I tend to always top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Hopefully the picture is nice and clear. My internet is working okay. So once they are top stitched, we're going to take one of the back pieces. Obviously it's not going to be a back piece, it's going to be a front piece, but it is the same size as this. And we're just going to find the centers of the long side and mark them. And then I'm going to find the centers of the unstitched sides on these two pieces. Sue says sound and picture all good. That's great. So I started doing this what's called the no fold method. I can't remember the name of the girl's channel. I can probably go back in and put a link to hers. She did it on a full size NCW, so I just kind of figured out what I needed to do, make the measurements to do it on a mini, and the 8-inch and the 7-inch piece work perfectly. So I'm going to take my bottom piece and I'm going to match up my centers, put some clips in. Actually, I'm probably going to be better off with my other clips because they're a little bit flatter. And I like to make sure that it's all lying nice and flat. Anybody who's followed me for a while will know that I can be a bit of a fussy bugger to make sure that things are lined up properly, but that is what I like and I find it works well for me. So what we need to do is we need to mark 1/2 inch either side of this center mark, which will basically create an inch channel mark, whatever, however you want to see it. I'm actually just going to use my inch ruler and I'm going to line up this center line with my where I've marked my centers, and I'm just using a heat erasable pen just to make 2 lines. Like I say, it creates an inch right in that center, and we're just going to top stitch down each side. Sue is saying Happy New Year to all. Valerie's saying hi, Deb. Hi, Valerie. And then we're just going to do exactly the same with our second piece. So the bigger piece goes on first, the smaller piece goes on last. Line up them centers. And then I just kind of fiddle about with the pieces until they're lying nice and flat and straight. And then we're just going to make a mark down this center and stitch along there. So that is the start of our card slots, and I'm just going to mark the center 2 3/4, and again I'm using a heat erasable pen because I will just be able to quickly sort of whip the iron over it and get rid of this mark. Sorry, I thought I'd changed my camera and I hadn't. So I've literally marked the center, and I'm going to stitch down to create the card slot. The reason that we stitched further up on this side is that when we put our cards in, they don't slip down behind and go too low. So when I stitch this part, I always back stitch across this bit here just to reinforce, because obviously that is our biggest stress point. And I always clip my threads as I go, because I'm just going to go back over. Just going to go back over this bit here, just to make sure that is nicely reinforced. Yep, I always clip my threads as I go because I hate lots of loose threads. So I'm just going to pop my iron on to be warming up. So then we need to put the second card back piece right sides together. You can, if you want to, mark your centers of this piece too, to make sure that they all line up nicely. I'm just going to use a couple of clips just to keep everything in place. So we want to make sure that these short edges are all lined up nicely, nice and straight. And then we're just going to stitch along these 2 short edges at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Take all the clips off, and I'm just going to turn this through. So I just kind of use my finger and thumb to sort of press this seam nice and flat, both the top and the bottom seam. And then I'm just going to lift my iron and I'm just going to give it a quick whiz over, just to kind of get rid of those marks. And I can kind of press that in place. I never ever iron too much on waterproof canvas, because it can sort of distort the shape. If you do find that you need to press it a bit more, use a pressing cloth to protect it. So now I'm just going to top stitch down each of these short edges, and then I'm going to come down the long edge as well, just to kind of keep everything in place and keep it nice and neat. Brian saying to Maureen, same here, he's had a dose of the virus as well, and saying Happy New Year to everybody. And when I need to, I just use my single stitch. So you can see how neat those card slots come out. They're not very bulky, and obviously because this is water resistant, waterproof canvas, it doesn't fray. So we're not worried about you know, this coming undone. You can't really use this method if you're using like a woven in fabric. It needs to be a waterproof canvas or something that isn't going to fray. Ivan says Happy New Year. Maureen says hi Brian, it's been rearing its ugly head on and off since November. Hope we are all over it soon. Yeah, there is so many things going about at the moment. It's just, yeah, it's just really crap when you're not well at this time of the year. Obviously I was sort of really quite poorly the beginning part of December, and it took me, I'd say it's only been in the last week really that I've started to feel sort of human. Donna's saying hello. So with this being a pre-sized zip, I've just cut my end off. The reason that I'm using this pre-sized zip is I have hundreds of them. Somebody gave me a big bag full of these sort of 6-7 inch zips, and I have hundreds. So I like to use them up in my mini NCWs, and yeah, they're just nice and easy to use. So if you've got any sort of really short zips lying around that you don't know what to use them for, a mini NCW is just the ticket. So I'm going to take one of my zipper pieces and just hold it in place, and I'm just going to stitch that down. Just move that clip along a little bit so it doesn't get caught, and I'm going to stitch that down at 1/4, or just probably just over 1/4 of an inch. If you need to use your stiletto to keep everything in place so it's nice and neat, then please do so. And then I just turn over the zip, the tab should I say, and then fold it back on itself. So can you see how I've created this really quite neat tab? And again, because it is water proof canvas, I'm going to be able to just cut this back. So I've only got 3 bits of fabric instead of 4, so it reduces the bulk in the coin pocket, which is what I prefer. So I am just going to top stitch this one down. Take my clip out now. And I'm just going to fling it on the floor for a second. And then I just trim that back to about 1/8 of an inch away from that stitch line. And that is my zip tab done on that side. I'm then going to measure just under 4.5, because I want this to be 4.5 in total finished, and obviously we're going to get a little bit of sort of extra bulk from the turn on this tab, so that's why I take it a little bit under the 4.5, like literally a fraction, like a tiny little fraction. So just obviously make sure that your zip pull is within the zip tape. I can't tell you how many times I have trimmed a zip back and then realised that the zip pull is now sitting on my desk. So I'm just going to use a couple of stitches to secure this in place just as I'm working, just so that it doesn't move. I just find it makes it easier. And I'm just going to repeat the entire process on the other side. Donna says hello. Sue says same here. I have a huge amount of smaller zips as I now buy zip by the meter. Yeah, I mean, literally this is all I ever use these little tiny zips for, is NCWs, and you know, sometimes maybe small pouches. Donna saying she did the same, bought some in a D-stash, still got most of them. Yeah, like I say, somebody, I think it was during COVID, so that'll tell you how long I've had them, messaged me and said, I've got all these zips, will you be able to use them? And I was like, yeah, eventually. And I'm still working my way through them. I'm kind of down to just sort of like a few colours now though. I've used up sort of like my most popular colours. No prizes for guessing one of them was green. So again, just trim this back and we have our zip all nice and neat. So I'm just going to mark my centres on these pieces because I thought I'd done it and I haven't. And I'm going to mark the same on these pocket pieces. Now, you kind of probably only need to mark your centres where you're popping your zip on, but I do it on both sides because it just helps me to line it up nicely when I'm coming to put it together. And we all know how much I like to find my centres. Mark my centres, make sure everything lines up because I'm a little bit extra. And how I have to tidy up as I go as well. Right, so the bit with the Decaville, put to one side for the time being. We'll pop where all the other bits and pieces to the side for the time being. You might say I've got lines marked here. That's just my stitch length for later on. I'm just going to use a little bit of double-sided tape to keep the zip in place. I'm kind of keeping it a good ½ inch out of the way of the edges because I don't want it to go all the way up to the edges. I'm just going to find the center of my zip and mark that on each side. I don't know what I did with my my pen lid there. I'm slightly out on that one. That's better. That'll teach me for trying to eyeball it. So we'll go right sides together, so right side of the zip to right side of the coin pocket. And I want my zip to open this way, so my zip head needs to be on the left. I don't know my left from my right, which Andy will confirm whenever I am trying to direct him anywhere. So if you need to open your zip just to make sure that this tape sits nice and neat, you can. And then just going to match up to this side. Again, the centres, just making sure, again, chuck them on the floor, making sure everything lines up nicely, keeping everything in place. If you want to use some double-sided tape again to keep your lining in place, absolutely do so. Whatever you need to do to make things work for you is the right way to do it. Sophie says, hi everyone. Maureen says, I was given a big bag of zips from a friend whose mum used to sew, but the majority are metal teeth, so I'm stuck with them as I don't want to risk breaking a needle or worse. So when you are stitching with metal teeth, just literally use your wheel to put the needle over the teeth. Obviously don't sew through them, but just take your needle over the teeth and it'll be fine. So I'm going to sew this down at 1/4 inch, but I'm just going to change my foot while I do this one. Where are we? I should have also said for the hardware, I am going to be using an 18mm metal snap. With a mini, you can use a 14 if you want. I just tend to use an 18 because that's what I just tend to reach for, but a 14 will work absolutely fine as well. So obviously I'm coming up to where my zip head is, so I'm just going to move it out of the way. And just flatten this down. I just use my fingers to press it and then turn it back on itself. So I am going to stitch through the exterior and the lining. Obviously a lot of the time I keep my lining out, but because of the way that I do my card slots, I do stitch it all together. So I'm just going to top stitch along, just making sure that it's all nicely flat and I'm happy with it. Keeping hold of my thread so they don't bunch up. And just obviously when I'm top stitching along here, I just keep it nice and slow. You know, there's no sort of like race to do it. Take it nice and slow, and then, you know, you keep your top stitching nice and neat. And I'm just going to repeat the process on the other side. So I'm matching up my centres. I'm going to put some double-sided tape on first. Donna says, turn metal teeth zips into flowers. There's loads on Pinterest. That is interesting. And Donna says, I'm never sure which way the metal snaps go on the flap. I'll go through that when we get to that bit. I'll show you. Sue says, I tend to put the female on the flap. Yeah, I tend to do the other way. But again, it's just personal preference. But yeah, I'll show you how I do it when we get to that. When we get to that bit. As I say, I always do my card slots first, then my coin pocket, and then my flap and my body, because I just feel that it comes together quicker for me a little bit that way. I don't know why, but now I'm just making sure that this is lined up really nice and neat. I don't want any waves. But yeah, that it's just personal preference. There we go. And lining up the centres for the lining piece. So it goes together exactly the same way. Right side of the exterior to right side of zip, and then sandwich it with the lining piece right sides together as well. And I'm just going to go back in with exactly the same seam allowance. Press it out. And I just kind of use the clips to keep these side pieces together. So again, it just keeps them nice and straight. Obviously, if you were using all cotton here, you can press it with the iron if you want to. I'm tending not to with us having the waterproof canvas. I'm just, like I say, I'm just making sure that it's sitting all nice and flat before I top stitch it. I need to get my rings made smaller. They keep twisting round. You see me fiddling with my wedding ring all the time. It was actually my engagement ring. It's a bit too big for me now, so it keeps spinning round. Okie doke. Open your zip. Ask me how I know. The amount of times I've done this bit, forgot to open my zip, and then I had a right faff on getting it open. So we're going to fold the entire pieces on themselves. I'm keeping this foot on for the time being. I will change it back again in a moment, but I want this zipper foot on because I want to be able to get nice and close here. So I'm basically matching up these top seams and popping some clips. I'm then going to come to the bottom and match my centers. And then just sort of pop clips in all the way around to make sure that it's all nicely lined up. And you're probably thinking, but she's going to have raw edges on the inside of her pocket. I will for a very short moment in time, but then you'll see what I'm going to do to make sure that I don't have that. So I'm going to stitch down 1/4 of an inch, which is why I have these little marks, so that I can see my seam allowance. But I'm not going to stitch down across and up because, again, we all know how extra I am. I'm going to stitch this side and then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to stitch this side and then I'm going to stitch the bottom. And that's just basically to make sure that these two top pieces stay exactly aligned with each other. And as I'm stitching it, it doesn't shift and turn and then I end up with excess at the far end when I get there. So that is why I sew it this way. So like I say, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Always back stitching at the beginning and end. So I make sure that these are lined up. Obviously, if you're using a walking foot, just where it's bulky, just sort of watch for it sort of getting caught. And then when I get to this side, I am just going to stitch along to this corner. So I'm going to trim all of my threads back. And then I'm going to trim back these seams to about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm basically going to half them. Pop my iron on again for a second, because we're going to need to be pressing this when it's all turned through. And then I'm just going to trim out bulk in these corners. So I like to open the zip fully at this point, just because it does make it a bit easier. And I'm just going to quickly, I'm going to use my iron to get rid of the marks on my zip. And kind of what I'm doing is I'm making sure that my Decaville is well stuck on, because I put it on in a bit of a hurry before I started. And then I'm just going to warm up this piece so it makes it easier to turn. Michelle says, Happy New Year, everybody. I think I need to do one of these. Seems to be everywhere at the minute. Yeah, NCWs always are, especially at New Year. But they are a very popular pattern. I'm just going to push out my corners as much as I possibly can with my little stumpy thumbs, my man hands. And then I'm just going to use a little pokey thing just to gently poke out these corners. Don't go too hard, because it will literally go right the way through. I then like to sort of open out this seam here, use my thumb and push it through. And then I do exactly the same thing. So open it out. Probably because I've got my zip there as well. Doesn't want to push through. There we go. So I make sure that these corners are well pushed through. Can you see how sort of like neatly they are sitting? And then I use my fingers to roll it all out. And then I'm just going to go back to these corners and just make sure everything's pushed through. It isn't the end of the world if you were to push through the corners, because it's probably going to be hidden when we come to put the bag together. But we just try to be careful so that we don't. So I'm just going to use my iron, my little press, just to give it a good press out before we top stitch it. And because we've cut these seams on the inside back to, you know, around about 1/8 of an inch, I'm going to top stitch it kind of just to say over 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of creating like a French seam in my coin pocket, so then you don't see any raw edges on the inside. Just move these out of the way. So that is our coin pocket pretty much all made up. I'm just gonna do the top stitching. We just try to get as near to the top as you possibly can. Obviously it's a little bit more difficult for me with having the walking foot because it will catch. You might find it easier if you're using like a normal machine, but obviously it is quite bulky in these top corners, so you probably won't be able to stitch through them. So just get as close as you possibly can. And that back stitch at the beginning and the end as well. And I forgot to change to a top stitching length there, but it's not the end of the world. So you're not massively actually going to see the top stitching on this, but it is what it is. So I like to give this a bit of a fold at this point, put some clips in because it's going to be going in folded. Now just kind of use my fingers to press along that edge so that when we come to put it in with our card slots, it's already good to go. Oh, Nikki's here. Hello, Nikki. Sue is saying, don't be scared of zips. Once you've mastered them, they're easy. Best thing to use double-sided tape. Yeah. And that's in relation to Sophie, who's a bit scared of doing zips. But honestly, like Sue says, once you master them, you'll be absolutely flying. So I'm just going to pop a couple of clips in the top just to keep them in place, and a couple of clips around the rest. Now again, hopefully you can see I've got my seam allowance marked in. Just going to change my foot back over because I prefer the other foot. But yeah, especially when I'm doing like the flap part of this, I like to make sure it's nice and precise. So draw your seam allowance in. Just making sure that this is well and truly on. I don't want it coming off mid stitch. Michelle says to Sophie, give it a go. I feel they are given a bad reputation. Once you've done them, they're a doddle. Absolutely right. So take these clips out of the way for now, and just before I turn it through, where I've marked my for my magnetic snap, I've literally just placed the center of the washer over the center of the placement and marked my two little lines. So I'm just going to mark, like push through with my seam ripper just before I turn it through, because I find it easier to do it at this stage. I need, what do I need? I need my pink and shears, that's what I need. I'm just going to cut back to about half using my pinking shears, making sure I don't go through my stitches. Hazel saying, Happy New Year, everybody. Just popping in, can't stay long as we're about to watch a film. I think that's mine and Andy's plan once I'm done here. Sue says, I've seen that teeny tiny toad, so cute. I don't drink much as I hate a hangover. Oh, that's in relation to Michelle. Yeah, I was very, very smug this morning when I woke up with no hangover because I drank tea last night. Susie, my main problem is placement of magnetic snaps on the main piece. The square on the pattern to me doesn't help. I'll show you how I place mine. I measure mine, if I'm honest with you. I don't tend to go off the placement on the pattern piece. I tend to measure mine. Oh, I'm just going to use the residual heat from this iron just to warm that up slightly so it's easier to push out. And it's quite handy with me having nails because I can use my nails to go along the edge. And I just use my fingers to roll out this seam to make sure it's nice and neat. Right, and I'm going to top stitch before I put my magnetic snap on, mainly just because I find that obviously it's easier to top stitch without having to go around that magnetic snap. I'm obviously not going to sew across the top because I still need to be in to put the magnetic snap on. What I'm doing here is I'm lining up the top and putting these clips on so that it keeps it all nice and flat. Michelle says, I was smug too, more so when my lot had to be tidy up their mess with their hangovers as I wasn't lifting a finger. Yeah, we didn't have too much mess. It was all right. We just kind of like had a quiet one, but it was nice. So I'm just really slowly top stitching around this flap. Again, you'll see that I quite often use my single stitch. Susan, is that the fabric from the advent box? Yeah, it's literally the last. I had thought like little pieces left, so I had enough to cut out a couple of pieces of the NCW. But I just love it so much. I mean, I obviously did make an NCW. I don't know whether I showed you the other day. I did make an NCW to match my bag, but these were the other pieces that were left. So I thought I'd get another one, and then I've got a spare, or I've got a nice present for somebody. Michelle says I did hoover at 9 AM though. Did help me. Bless. I did think about getting the hoover out at 9 o'clock this morning because I was woken up at 6 o'clock this morning, somebody coming in from their night out, and I'm only jealous, but I did think about putting the hoover on and then thought I don't really want a hoover, so I'm not going to do that. So I put the male part of my snap onto my flap and the female part onto the body of my bag. It's just personal preference. I don't actually think there's any science to How they should go on, this is just kind of what I prefer. I'm just popping a little bit of beacon glue onto the back of my magnetic snap and pushing it through those holes I created. Obviously I don't need to put any Decavil behind because we've already got Decavil on it. And then I'm just going to pop the back over those prongs and push them out nice and flat. And I'm just going to use a little bit of tape just to protect that fabric from those prongs. Nikki's saying, loving your nail polish colour too. Thanks. It's out of the norm for me. I'm normally like green. I'm having green. Or very occasionally I'll go like a sort of navyish blue, but yeah. So I'm just stitching over that top seam now, basically just basting that in place. So that is that part of the magnetic snap in place. Hazel saying, I've made many of the full size NCWs but only made a couple of the minis yet. Like, I'm the opposite way around. Like, I just love the mini. I think it's because I use a mini a lot. Like, the full size isn't my personal preference for a purse. It's too big for me. So I think that's why I'm sort of always drawn to the mini. But if I'm making it for somebody else and they want a larger bag, then I'll totally make the full size one. Right, where's my ripper? Okay, so I've marked where I want my nameplate to be. It's about 1.5 inches down. I've just centered it, and then I've marked where I know that my prongs will go through on this washer. I usually tend to go about 1.5 inches down from the top, and that works well for me. But obviously you can place your nameplate wherever you want. If you wanted to put a nameplate on, you don't have to. And again, I'm just going to use a little bit of beacon glue on the back. I'm not putting lots on. I don't know if you can kind of see, but I'm kind of dabbing it. I'm not putting loads on. I don't want it to sort of squirt out from behind the magnetic, from behind the nameplate. I just want it to help, like, keep it in place. It reduces the tension and the stress on the hardware when you use a little bit of glue. Okay, so make sure it's nicely straight. Place it over. I push my prongs out, and then just make sure from the front it is nice and straight, and then really push those prongs into place to keep it in place. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same on where I put my magnetic snap. Now what I do is I mark my centers and I draw a line, and then I come up 2 1/4. I think that is slightly different from the measurement that is in the pattern. But the reason that I come up 2 1/4 is I put tons and tons of stuff in my purse. So I find just moving it that tiny little bit gives me a bit more space in the purse. So my preference is 2 1/4. But if you want to place it at the exact place that the pattern stipulates, the measurement is in the pattern. So just mark up along this line to where the placement is, and pop your washer there and mark where your prongs need to be. Oh, there's my back. And again, just a little bit of tape. I've got this amazing little hook on the underside of my other desk, and it fits my tape just perfectly. Sophie's saying, do you use quilters wash away tape? That's absolutely fine. This one isn't wash away, but it's just what I tend to use. But quilters tape will work perfectly well as well. So just before I start, I'm just going to find the center line of this lining piece, and I'm going to cut along about 2.5 inches, and I tend to use my Pinken shears just because I think it's habit of when I've used cotton and it helps to stop it fraying, and I've usually always got them out as well. So I match up the centres, we're going right sides together. And then just sort of keeping it flat, I pop a load of clips in to keep it in place. Except I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't put my flap on yet. Thinking this doesn't feel right. Why doesn't it feel right? Because the flap's not on yet. So flap right side together, and it's the opposite side to where the magnetic snap is that we're placing the flap. Right sides together, match your centres, and then we're just going to base this in place. God, that would have been awkward, wouldn't it, if I'd sewn that together and the flap was still sitting on my desk. Michelle's, what fabric is your lining? Is it vinyl or stabilised cotton? The lining's waterproof canvas. So just before I sew it in place, I like to just lift up my snap and snap it in place. And I'm just making sure that I am eyeballing it, but I'm just kind of making sure that those centres are lined up. So basically I'm making sure that it's nice and straight, like it's nice and even. So obviously, like for argument's sake, if my flap wasn't put on nice and straight and centered, it would be kind of sitting like that. But because I have my flap all nicely in place, and I've obviously moved it, so let's just do it again. I can then see that it's going to line up perfectly. And like I said, we all know I'm a little bit extra, so and then if you need to kind of move it, if you need to move the flap ever so slightly to get it to line up, then you can do that. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to baste that in place just along the top, 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, so it's obviously within the seam allowance. And now I'm going to put my linings and my lining and exterior together. That was so, I was thinking, this doesn't feel right. Why doesn't this feel right? Because you were missing a piece completely, Deb. Oh, I'm just going to do this side where this piece has a little bit of a crease in it, flatten it out, and then, like say, just going all the way around, popping clips in. You can never have too many clips. If in doubt, add more clips. Water, thanks Sue. I have been drinking plenty. When I came off yesterday, I went and drank a pint of water straight away, and I have got my absolutely huge water cup, whatever it's called. It's not a Stanley. I'm not that posh. So I always like to start mine where the flap is. It's just personal preference, because I like to stitch over this part a little bit extra, like a sort of back stitch over it, and make sure it's sort of really secured, because again, that's probably where you're going to have like the biggest sort of stress point. And then we're just coming around the whole way at 1/4 of an inch the whole way. Don't feel that you've got to race round. Take it nice and slow. If you need to draw your seam allowance, then you just got to draw your seam allowance on. It's fine. Sophie's saying, what is a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance? A scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, I think, is like just under 1/4 of an inch. I think it's like a quilter's term. And I don't know if you can kind of see from this angle, but can you see how I've got my hand really flat? What I'm kind of doing is I'm keeping those pieces sort of together, trying to stop them shifting, and using this hand to twist and maneuver this in place. You'll see then I'll shift my hand when it's kind of come round to this point. And then when I come round to this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew another seam just over where the flap is, just slightly behind that original seam that I made. And that's just to sort of reinforce it. Yeah, Hazel's confirming it's just slightly smaller. So I'm just trimming down with my Pinken shears. The curved parts I'm leaving. These parts I'm not touching them. So you just literally want to trim it down by about half, making sure that you don't cut through your stitching, which I have on many occasions. If you do cut through your stitching, it's not the end of the world. Wherever, if you have caught it, for argument's sake, if I'd caught it here, I would literally just go back in and like re-stitch it just past that seam allowance and then blend it in again. If I had caught my stitching, I've done it loads. It happens loads. You know, don't sort of stress about it if it does. So just to make turning this a little bit easier, I'm going to use my iron just to warm it up. Because I'm on the back of the waterproof canvas, it's got like a rubberized thing to it. I'll just use my Teflon sheet just to protect it so it doesn't sort of like melt it. And I'm basically just using my iron to like warm it up, and it just makes turning it through ever so slightly easier, especially with the waterproof canvas. It can be a little bit difficult to turn. So I'm just having to maneuver it because this is my small iron and small mat. That should be okay. Just gently pull it through that hole that we made earlier on. And then I'm just going to use my fingers just to sort of push these seams through from this side, and then I'll roll it with my fingers as well to make sure it's all fully out. So I'll literally just work my way like there, it's not pushed out fully, so I can just kind of go in through that opening and push it through. So this can sometimes take a little bit of time, but it's worth doing. It really is. So you can use some clips to keep it all in place. But just as you're sewing it, it doesn't move too much. Now don't worry about this bit here because we're going to cover it. I don't want anybody sort of thinking, but there's going to be like a big opening that you're going to be able to see. You're not. It's all going to be covered. So I always start my top stitching from here and then come along. Reason being is because this is going to be hidden when it's turned. So I can do a little bit of a back stitch to keep it in place, and you're not going to see it basically. So I literally start it just past where the flap goes in, and just move that back, otherwise I'll end up with more broken clips. I've broke loads lately. I hold on to my threads just to make sure that they don't bunch up. And this first bit, what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that my lining isn't sort of moving up and underneath, and just sort of keeping it down and in place as I stitch, so it all stays nice and neat. And then as I come round, I just kind of use my fingers to kind of keep it pushed in place so that it doesn't roll too much. Sometimes with, especially some of the softer, more subtle vinyls, or some of the thicker vinyls, it can really want to roll. So I just kind of use my finger and I kind of push down against that seam so that it doesn't move. I'm just thinking I really should have checked my bobbin before I started this. I mean, I had a full bobbin when I started, but before top stitching, I really should have checked my bobbin. I am going to check it before the next part, I promise. Right, I'm just going to leave them clips out because I'm going to need them in a second. Let's come in a tiny touch closer. And just moving this a little bit closer in. Right, let me just these edges back. Obviously, if you're using a lighter to singe the edges of your threads, be very careful. We don't want any burnt fingers. Right, we're on the home straight. Right, Michelle, I'm checking my bobbin. Oh no, I've still got loads. We're absolutely fine. I'm the same, Michelle. I'm the world's worst for not checking my bobbin. I am so bad. Because I've put my bobbin back in, I just want to make sure that my stitches are right. Yeah, they are. Sometimes if you don't have your bobbin in quite right, obviously your stitches could not be correct. And because I'm still going to be top stitching, the last thing that I want is for my stitching not to look pretty. So I'm going to line up the card slot. Now we know that this is the center because I folded it and I cut it along the center. So we know that this part of the stitching here is going to go over this line pretty much. So I'm just lining it up so I've got pretty much the same from the top as to the bottom. I'm making sure that it's nice and square. I am eyeballing it. If you want to use a ruler and mark along from, you know, these edges to make sure that it's all centered, by all means do so. With an NCW, making sure that your markings are spot on is really what can make or break like the NCW coming together. You know, people might see me make one and go, oh my god, she's so extra, checking this, checking that, checking the other. But I find that it makes it work better because then I'm not having to unpick, I'm not having to go back and redo things. So I'm pretty sure that that is lined up all okay, but just to make sure, I'm going to lift that up. I'm going to fold it over and I'm just going to make sure that this isn't sitting to one side, it's not skew width, it's nice and straight, and I'm pretty happy with that. I think my card slots could be a little bit straighter. Like I say, you know, I am a little bit extra and I would say I'm sorry, but do you know what, I'm not because it's me and it's who I am. Right, so I'm just going to check that again. Yeah, I think that's sitting really nice and straight. And I did debate on whether at this stage I was going to, like before I top stitch this part, whether I would change my thread over to one of the green threads like before I started, and I was like, no, I think I'm still going to use beige because obviously it would still need to be beige underneath, and I don't always like using different threads top and bottom because sometimes they can show. And I thought, no, I think the beige will look nice on this green because the type of green it is, and I'm actually really pleased because I think it does look really nice, and I'm loving it. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch down each side here, top stitch down at 1/4 of an inch, and that should pretty much line up with this top stitching here. Now I am going to back stitch because I want the reinforcement there, and I'm okay with back stitching. I know some people don't like to see it, but I'm okay with it. And then I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. And what I like to do as well, I don't know if you can see that, you might be able to see better on this angle, is I kind of pull this over so that I know that it's sitting really nice and flat against those card slots. So everything's really sort of nipped in, it's all nice and neat. And then can you see how that top stitching has lined up with that top stitching? Hopefully you can see sort of from this side. Like I say, I do have a little bit of back stitching there, but I am absolutely okay with that because I would rather have the reinforcement and the strength in those stitching and know that it's not going to come loose. Okay, we're nearly there. So can you see, you can't see any of those basting stitches that were in the card slots because we did it at 1/8 of an inch, so it was all out of the seam allowances. And my trusty double-sided tape again. Hazel's saying it's going to look beautiful. Fingers crossed. Sophie says, so I'm not the only one who's playing Bob and Chicken. Absolutely not. I play it on the daily. Sue says, oh my God, looking gorgeous already. I'm really pleased with it. I am really, really pleased with it. So I'm just going to take the back of this double-sided tape that I'm placing in the middle. Now, I like my zip to be towards the back. If you prefer yours to be at the front, just do it the other way. But I prefer mine to be at the back. So mine is going to go in this way. And I'm literally just lining that up with that centre line. Let go of the clips. And I'm just making sure, probably be a touch over that way, that it's all nicely lined up. It's probably sitting a tiny touch too high. I'm just going to move it down ever so slightly. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that this top part and the bottom part are pretty much lining up at the same point of the card slots on either side. And then I just kind of quickly check, because I know roughly where that's going to knit together, to make sure that it's nice and even. And the only reason that I know roughly where it's going to knit together is because I've made so many of them that I can pretty much eyeball it. I don't, but I can. Donna says, I'm trying the different thread top as every other top stitch is a different colour. Yeah, I just tend to go with it, if I'm honest with you. I tend to either go contrasting or try to have a lining that matches in so that the thread colour doesn't need to change. Valerie says, what do you think about double cap rivet magnetic clasp from the Green Machine? Is it strong enough for the closure of the NCW? I haven't used their rivet magnetic clasp. I have used other ones and they've worked absolutely fine. They've worked perfectly well. I just don't tend to use them as a rule because I'm just used to doing it this way. But I think if you've got them and you want to give it a try, then definitely like give it a try. So on this side, what you can do is you can mark your center here and you can stitch your box from the center on this side. Of course, it's me, so I do it slightly differently. So I literally find the center on my wallet, and then hopefully you can see those two marks. Then use this center line on my inch wide ruler and line it up over those two marks, and I mark down each side of the ruler to give me an inch. Hopefully you can see that gives me an inch, and I stitch it from this side. It's quite different to how quite a few people do it, but this is just what I really prefer on my bags, on my purses. So first thing I do is I keep this part out of the way, and what I want to do is I want to drop my needle down where that line of stitching is, and then again I'm kind of pushing down to make sure that like nothing slips and moves. Obviously we've got the double-sided tape there, so it shouldn't, but I'm just kind of keeping everything in place. And when I get to this side, I'm going to pull this out of the way and I'm going to stop just pretty much at that top stitching line, and then I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going to keep a hold of my threads. I'm using my finger to push this piece of the flap out of the way, dropping my needle down, so I'm just cutting back all these threads really close to the edges. And then I'm just going to use a wipe just to wipe away. Obviously that is a heat pen, but it comes off with a good old baby wipe as well. Brian says, I find them plenty strong, Valerie, and it gives the design feature if you want one. Yeah, cool. Just got a tiny bit of thread there that I want to get. There we go. So the last thing of how, again, ruler, measure, I'll get me with a smaller ruler actually, is again on the pattern piece you have ways of marking where your pieces are going to go. How I like to measure mine is literally lie it nice and flat, and from this edge I put my corner there. I want my 1 inch, and then I literally move the ruler out until the 3.5 meets the edge of the lining, and then I do the same by putting the 3.5 on here, and I move the ruler out until the edge meets. And this is just kind of where I've found like works well for me. It's total preference whether you use the markings on the pattern. This is just sort of a quick way that I've found to do it. And I just put a clip in first just to make sure that that is all even. If you need to kind of adjust slightly, you can. So you can see that that is all pretty even. I just need to move this one ever so slightly. And I'm just making sure that I'm happy with that, and then I can go ahead and put my rivets in. All of my bits and pieces for my rivets. So if you want to measure down so that all your rivets are nice and even, then by all means you can. Again, I think in the pattern there is measurements for placement of the rivets. I just kind of, I do mark mine first, like before I do them, but I do just kind of eyeball it. I do it by kind of feeling, especially on this one where the where the bulk of that pocket is, and then I just kind of eyeball other markings just to sort of set the look roughly the same. Come down a tiny touch on this one and a tiny touch on this one too. Sue says, I finally, fingers crossed, sorted out my top stitching on thicker fabrics and vinyls. It seems to be my thread. Used some from the advent box and tried some on some scraps. I need to buy some text 35. You might find that text 45 works as well, Sue, because there's very little difference between text 35 and text 45. So I'm just using my punch to punch through. Michelle says, I've used double cap rivet magnetic clasps on bags for a cool feature and strong enough too. That's really good to know. I have actually got some. I just don't tend to use them. So that's really good to know that they will work well. So I'm just working my way around. I'm punching all my holes first. And then I will put my rivets in and set them. Hopefully all of them have gone through. They have. So I'm probably going to need, I'm probably going to need 2 10mm and 2 8mm, because I think I'm going to need 10mm to go through these thicker ones. 2, 3, 4. I have got a video that goes through rivets and the best lengths to use, how to work out which length that you need to use. It's in my masterclass playlist, which I think is in the description of here as well. So if you want to if you're not sure about using rivets and how to work out which length that you'd need, go and check out that video. It's one of my earlier videos, so you know, things like lighting and what have you maybe aren't the best, but I definitely sort of explain all the different lengths of rivets and such like, and then also using the press as well. So I'm just going to move the rest of the, I might have to move my camera. So I'm kind of going to need my rivet press towards the edge of my table so that I can get it in. And I'm just, as I'm pressing them, I'm just making sure that I'm happy with them. You want to make sure that when you're pressing your rivets, they're sitting nice and straight. They're not sort of sitting wonky, because then they will press wonky. This part reminded me of why I gave up making NCWs. I don't yet have a rivet press, and hand setting them was a train wreck. You can sew. You can definitely sew them. I'm not happy with that rivet, so I'm going to take it out. 2 seconds while I get my pliers. Just get another rivet out, because like I say, I was not happy with that one. I could feel that it was sort of set, one was set slightly off centre to the other, and I would worry that it wouldn't hold. So I'm just going to redo it for the sake of a couple of seconds. It is worth it. But yeah, trying to hand set them with the tool can be awkward, just because of, like, you're not doing it on the flat, you're doing it in, like, when it's already sort of 3D. And right, I just need to make sure that that is sitting properly. That's better. I'm happier with that one. Right, let's move this camera back. Try not to make anybody seasick. So there we go. NCW, all done, all nice and square. I'm really happy. I'll come move to my outer camera. I'm really happy with how well that sort of lined up. Obviously the card slots I can show you with a next gift voucher that is being used. So you can see that the card slot, the cards don't go down behind, because we've got that line in, and then the card slots there, they all work perfectly. I bet you've lost count of how many NCWs you've made. So, and what I like to do with mine, especially ones when they're vinyl, because you will have to kind of manipulate this vinyl into sort of sitting nice and flat where these sort of pleats are, is I'll sort of, I'm trying to think how to explain it. I'll sort of really manipulate those pleats into place, squish it, put the thing down, and then what I'll do is I'll pop my tailor's clapper on it, and then it'll just kind of put it'll put a crease into these pieces so they'll sit nice. So I just kind of leave it overnight, I only tend to really do that on bags that are NCWs that are vinyl, because the vinyl needs to kind of learn where you want it to sit, if that makes sense. Hazel says, very nice, I've had to mute you so we can't hear you. She's sick of my voice. She's sick of me. Brian said sewing was worse, but it was also early on in my bag making journey, and I'm excited to give it another try and buy River Press. I mean, yeah, keep an eye out on Facebook, because you never know, somebody might sell one and you know that doesn't use them, so you might get yourself like a good bargain. So yeah, but I'm going to come back onto my other camera here. So I'm going to obviously, like I say, just leave that sort of sitting that way, just with my tailor's clapper on it overnight. You can use a heavy book. Doesn't need to be you know, anything massively heavy. You don't want to squish it. You just want these creases to be like put in place. But yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. I love an NCW. I don't know, did I show you the one that goes with this bag? I can't remember whether I did or not. I think it might be in the bag. I think I might have shown you. So Susie, and you train it. Beautiful mini. Yeah, as I say, it is my favourite. Like, I do sort of stick to what I know sometimes, which I need to get out of the habit of. But I think with the mini NCW, like, I know I like it. So if I'm making a bag for me, I just make a mini NCW, because although obviously been on an hour and 40 today while I've been sort of chatting and sewing, but when I've got one cut out and I'm sewing and there's no other distractions, I'm not talking or anything, I can literally sew in about 45-50 minutes, especially if I've got everything already prepped, so I can get them together really, really quickly if I need to. Valerie's saying short again. I will. Excuse my dodgy tracky bottoms, but I needed to be comfortable. Far too much food in the last few weeks. Right, where is it? It's here. Just make sure I'm not giving you all my bank details with my bank cards, and that's in here. But yeah, this is my one that I made to go with my other bags. Obviously, I used the other vinyl out of the bag maker's box. I've got this vinyl as my flap, and then I've got the same waterproof canvas and cotton in. So yeah, I just love it. And this one was, can you see how those pleats are now sitting really nice and neat? And that's because I put something heavy on it overnight after I'd finished it. Ivan says yes please. There you go. Love it. So Sophie says use the encyclopedia of sewing. Yeah, I mean, it's then got double use, hasn't it? You know, I'm gonna have some water sew. Are you proud of us? Oh my god, it's freezing. So yeah, that is mini NCW on New Year's Day. I know it's quite a thing for quite a few people to sew up an NCW either New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And I had one cut out, so I thought, why not? Sue says, well done on the water. Go me. Can we see the bag again? Of course you can. So, Trailblazer in everything that came in the 77 Advent box. Vinyl, I used the waterproof or water resistant canvas on the inside of the flap and on the inside here, and also on the inside of this bag. I used my template for the zipper, which I just love. Like, I don't think I want to do any others anymore. But yeah, I used pretty much all of the hardware. So obviously, like my straps on the top, my feet. I don't know if you can see that I've quilted the bottom and then quilted the sides as well. But yeah, I absolutely love it. Haven't been anywhere to take it with me yet, but we'll be back to normal from pretty much Friday, I think. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me. Like I said, it is something that I want to do on a bit more of a regular basis. Not really what I would call tutorials or anything like that, but I will kind of, explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what have you. Sue's saying, going to make one, would it be better to start with cotton on the outer first? Yes, 100%. Cotton and interface it with woven interfacing, and it'll go together beautifully. I don't know what I did with my other one. I think I showed it yesterday, but I can't remember what I've done with it now. But the cotton will press really, so obviously you can iron it as you go as well and really press it out. Obviously still, if you want to use like water resistant canvas or waterproof canvas on the inside, it's not difficult to sew with at all. And it does make things a little bit easier because you're not interfacing it. You can do the card slots so that they're a little bit like flatter. They're not as bulky. But then the exterior, definitely use cotton because it does make it easier. Hazel says that's a beautiful trailblazer. Got the pattern but never made it. I was the same, Hazel. I bought it so early on in my bag making journey. It was like, I'm going to make this bag. I can do this. And then made, I can't remember what it was, but it was I think it was in a net, and it was an absolute disaster. I was like, yeah, you're bitten off more than you can chew here, love. And then sort of looked at how many pattern pieces there was for the trailblazer and was like, I can't do this. Like, absolutely not. I can't do it. And it sat like on my hard drive and partly printed out for years, like what, maybe 7 year, 8 year. I don't know when it came out. I literally bought it when it came out, which was maybe what, 2016, 2017, something like that. 2018 maybe. But anyway, and I just decided the day before going to Wrexham that I was going to make one, and it went fine. I made a couple of mistakes, but who doesn't? Sue says, thank you yet again for taking the time out to show us how to make the NCW. I mean, I'll always take the time out to show you how to make an NCW because I just love it. And I've usually got one cut out because if I'm cutting a bag out, I'll usually cut an NCW out to go with it. Maureen says, thank you so much. Lovely wallet, and of course a trailblazer, a matching wallet at Just Lush. Yeah, I do love them. And I'm so, like, obviously because it was a Christmas present of Andy as well, I wanted to make something that I would use all of the time. I didn't want to make something that, I'd only sort of use every now and then. He bought me it for Christmas. He was kind enough to let me open it before Christmas. He did take it off me Christmas Eve, wrap it up and give it me back on Christmas morning. So yeah, I wanted to make something that I would use all the time. I would get so much use out of because, I hadn't bought it myself. It was a gift. So, and I'm so pleased. As I say, as I started unwrapping it, I knew what I was going to make with it. I was like, as I started to see all the different materials, I was like, it's going to be another trailblazer. Sue says she's got plenty of waterproof canvas to use. Yeah, I do really love using waterproof canvas for the inside of the NCW. I just think it really helps to add structure. It makes those card slots really nice and neat. Sorry, that's because I've drunk water. And it's really hard wearing as well. Like, none of my NCWs and they get well used, none of them have ever deteriorated. I haven't had any sort of like wearing. I have when I've made them with cotton and I've interfaced them, they have sometimes they start to wear and what have you, and they just don't with the waterproof canvas. So I definitely think that they're like, it's worth using for the linings 100%. Sue's saying she's making a apothecary bag now. Oh, is that the Sincerely Jen? I saw that she was doing a live as well, finishing that off. I think that's probably one of the few ones of hers that I haven't got. I'll have to maybe give it a go but I need to work through some of my other patterns first. So anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. It will be up for all to see. I know I've probably not gone in as much detail as sort of a tutorial, but hopefully you've learned some tips and tricks. Donna says, it's been lovely, even if I was late. That's fine. No such thing as late, really. Kept me company through all the colour changes. Now I'm picking some top stitching. It didn't go well. Hate when, like, that was why I double checked that bobbin when I changed it over, because I've done that so many times. Put the bobbin back in, I haven't quite got it in perfectly, and then my stitching has been, and it's usually been top stitching as well, and I've had to unpick it. Sophie says, thank you for another lovely informative live stream. You're very welcome. I am hoping to do at least one a week. We'll see. I have got one scheduled for next week, so you can go in and click to be notified. It is going to, my lives will be mainly on an afternoon though, because I'm going to have to fit them in during my working hours, because I can't really give up another evening. I need to see my family at some point. So the lives will probably be on an afternoon, but they will be available to go back and watch whenever you want to. Sue says, off to find some thread now. Yeah, go and check out Little Stitcher Sews. I really like her Tex 45. I think Misfits do some Tex 35. Off the top of my head, I'm sure it's Misfits. I haven't used it, so I can't comment on what it's like, but I know that I've heard other people speak highly of it. But I do love the Little Stitcher Sews Tex 45. And if your machine's been all right with a 35, it should be all right with a 45. Fingers crossed. So yeah, so right, I'm gonna love yous and leave yous. I'm gonna go off and finish the rest of my water and go and have a cup of tea. Surprisingly, honestly, like how I don't look like a cup of tea, I've got no idea. But I've really enjoyed hanging out with you, and like I say, it'll be every week, but it will be on, I think, probably either a Tuesday or a Thursday afternoon, depending on what's happening in my week. But I'll try and sort of schedule them a good few days beforehand so you can see. And then if you can join, great. And if not, you can always catch up with them later date. If you're watching this back on a replay, if you've got any questions, if you've got, you've seen something you don't quite understand, drop it in the comments and I'll come back and answer it for you. It's absolutely no problem. I'll always get a notification of any comments that come on any of my videos. So until next week, I will see you then. Enjoy the rest of your week. Happy New Year, everybody, and see you later. Bye.